From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm Vasilios. That's Sean Fazan. We got some legal tampering stuff to deal with today with the NFL. Remember to rate, subscribe, review, like, share, everything counts. We use that stuff and that information to bring you guys more content whenever we can. And Sean, let's get right into it, man. A lot of stuff going on with the Saints in this early tampering free agency period, whatever it is nowadays.
Yeah, legal tampering is one of the most unique terms I've ever heard just in life, but especially in the sports world. But here we are in the midst of the legal tampering period. Free agency technically doesn't begin until Wednesday. Be sure to rate, review, subscribe, like, share on YouTube on the Fox 8 New Orleans YouTube channel, so check that out as well. We'll be cranking these out a lot throughout this week and in the coming weeks with a lot of content, especially when it comes to the New Orleans Saints. So, since the last time we spoke, not since the last time we recorded the podcast, but since the last time we released the podcast, a lot of things have certainly changed with the New Orleans Saints. We had a podcast recorded yesterday. We had to throw it in the trash can because, frankly, this ever-evolving door of NFL free agency threw us quite the curveball, and wouldn't you know it, we're going to talk about that today because something happened that we were not expecting. And I will be the first one to raise my hand and say this. I did not see this coming. Jameis Winston, the topic of conversation, it always seems to draw a lot of buzz, a lot of interest. I mean, the guy is not boring. I will give him that. He is coming back to the Saints on a reported $4 million one-year deal with incentives, could go up to $8 million. Okay, that broke late Monday evening, right before we were about to release the podcast where I was breaking down the teams where I thought Jameis Winston would be a good fit for and he would not return to the Saints. So we threw that in the trash, and here we are. So what happened? Jameis Winston makes the decision to return to New Orleans. That's true. But this is what I believe this decision tells me, and this is why Jameis made that decision. It's because it wasn't all his decision. To me, the market made the decision for him. I wrote it last year when he was a free agent. The market just simply was not as hot for a guy like Jameis Winston coming off an injury. He just had a small sample size, and then, his years in Tampa Bay, a little bit of a roller coaster. Well, this year looks like it was worse because no one was interested, obviously, in offering him a starting quarterback contract. Certainly feels like if he accepted a one-year, $4 million deal, there wasn't a whole lot of backup quarterback opportunities, at least with that would match the $4 million offer. What's interesting, though, is that leak came out Friday about the Saints offering him a restructured contract, which is basically a pay cut. And at that time, I know the legal tampering period began on Monday, but you had to get the idea that the Jameis camp was going to get working, see what's happening, work some back channels, see what the market was going to be. So by the time the legal tampering period begins, by the end of day one, that's like an eternity from when the actual tampering period starts to the end of the first day. So many things happening. You're working the phone so much.
The longest 12 hours.
Yeah, and so he ends up agreeing to the $4 million contract. And like I said before, it's all about market. It is all about the market. I'm sure Jameis likes New Orleans. I'm sure Jameis likes the city. I'm sure the city has been good to him. I'm sure he likes his teammates. But make no mistake about it. I mean, this is the best deal he could have gotten.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, look, we all get our feelings hurt. It's tough. It's tough. I mean, he last year he was essentially benched when he was healthy enough to come back. They stuck with Andy Dalton, and they rode the rest of the season, despite what ended up being fairly average quarterback play with Andy Dalton, and not the guy they had signed to be their starter. So we all thought at that point he's as good as gone. Why wouldn't he be? Go out there, see what's available. You want an opportunity, but, check out the teams. Carolina, they're going to draft a quarterback. I thought it would be perfect for Jameis to be a bridge guy somewhere who's going to draft a rookie, and that's the best way to get on the field, knowing that eventually that organization would pass the baton off to that rookie at some point, but at least you're on the field.
Sure.
Atlanta felt like the perfect spot, or another potential spot for him. Desmond Ridder is, I don't know if anyone sees franchise material. I know they like him, but I thought that's you can go the whole veteran insurance policy with Atlanta, sign Jameis. They know him, Terry Fontenot, Ryan Nielsen. Atlanta certainly knows him from his time both with the Saints and with, obviously, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And they went with Taylor Heineke. Taylor Heineke.
I didn't see that one coming, by the way.
Who I think is a little bit of an overachiever. I think he's very well liked. He's kind of got that scrappy, you pull for him from a small school kind of guy. But, that's where they're at. That organization, the people in that organization probably know Jameis as much as the other two organizations he's played for. And they roll with Taylor Heineke. The Indianapolis Colts, they're likely going to draft the guy. Mm-hmm. Again, another bridge, another veteran insurance policy. And if you believe the reports, apparently they had at least some modest interest in Jameis last year. Apparently not this year. And then the team I can't figure out, the Washington Commanders. We'll see what they do, but right now, obviously, they don't have Heineke anymore. Sam Howell, is that their only quarterback on the roster?
That's the only one on the roster right now, and from what I understand, they feel pretty good about that guy, especially after they brought in Eric Bieniemy.
Okay. I don't know where they pick. Maybe they look in the draft. I don't know. But that seems like okay, that's what you're rolling the dice on? Okay. I know Jameis has had his ups and downs, but at the very least, he can provide you veteran backup, mentorship / productivity if the young kid doesn't go. And to me, that's a clearer path to the field than the New Orleans Saints, who just signed their new franchise quarterback, who the team made it abundantly clear he is our guy. And not just the team in terms of the front office, in terms of the head coach, half the locker room.
Yeah, and it's like you mentioned before, they haven't rolled out the red carpet for a free agent signing since Drew Brees.
Right.
So they definitely had all the bells and whistles going for Derek Carr.
So, make no mistake about it, he will be a clear-cut backup with no chance to start unless there is some injury, which no one wants to see. We'll knock on wood. I know Carr's had, an amazing run of durability, but the second you say that, sometimes things can get a little crazy. So this is where he's at. This is what he has to take, and I'm sure it was a humbling experience. Another one, I'm sure it was not something he was expecting, but like they say, it is what it is, and sometimes you got to make the best business decision possible. In 1 year, $4 million plus incentives to get up to $8 million was the best he could possibly do. So, Jameis Winston returns as the number 2 quarterback, which leads me to my next point. The Saints, in my opinion, made this offer. It was strictly for, hey, it can't hurt to ask, but I believe they made this offer with the idea that it was more than likely he was going to turn that down, because at the very least he was going to find somewhere, even if he's penciled in as the backup, where we'll have a true opportunity to get on the field, a better path to get on the field than the one the Saints could provide in 2023. Mm-hmm. But you ask, and it makes sense financially to get it, to at least ask, see what he would do, with the idea that perhaps he would not agree to it, but lo and behold, here he is. He is back. So I'm very curious to know, and they're going to say the right things publicly, but if the Saints were as surprised as we all were that Jameis Winston has returned to New Orleans. So, is there a risk? Is there a surprise? We've talked about that. There definitely is a surprise. Is there a risk? Maybe a small one. What is the risk? We know Derek Carr is the guy.
Yeah.
We know Derek Carr is the guy. But we also know football is an imperfect game.
Say that again.
It's an imperfect game. Carr himself has admitted to being imperfect, as we all are, even your favorite quarterback is imperfect. He said he's going to promise perfect effort. Great. But when Carr is imperfect on the field, are there calls? How quickly are the calls for Jameis Winston? Because, as we know, Jameis Winston has a group on Twitter that seems to, they are as active as any group I've ever seen for a player of his caliber on Twitter that will rally to their guy. God bless him. But that would be chatter on the outside. On the inside, I don't necessarily think that would be the case, because here's the thing. They went all in financially with Derek Carr. They're rolling with Derek Carr. So if it's performance, he's going to get as much leeway as humanly possible to figure it out. And there's a strong possibility that at least to start the season, while they're ironing out, personnel, things of that nature, to get things going on the field, develop the right chemistry, which every team goes through, there's going to be some imperfections, perhaps some screw-ups on the football field. And there's also this, and I alluded to it earlier. Derek Carr has the locker room. Derek Carr, everyone understands it's Derek Carr's team. So while the outside noise in that hypothetical scenario could get loud, it happened last year where it got a little loud on the outside. But I was told, and I trust my people on this, that inside the locker room they were fine with Andy. They were fine with Andy Dalton, and there was no rift, and there was no fracturing. I think on the inside, I think the overwhelming feeling would be, this is Carr's team. We're rolling with that. So you can call it a small risk, but he is going to be the number 2 quarterback for the Saints. With his only realistic path to get on the field would be an injury or
just an implosion of some sort.
An implosion, which wouldn't necessarily manifest itself until later in the season, because the New Orleans Saints are obviously going to give their $30+ million investment every possible opportunity to succeed. They're certainly not going to pull the plug at the first sign of trouble. There's going to be mess up. There's going to be mistakes, and we understand that, and they understand that. So I think all in all, I do think the organization is a little surprised. I had heard that their next move was going to be, when inevitably Jameis Winston turns them down and they have to release him, was to bring back Andy Dalton. But Winston beat him to the punch. He's going to come back. So I guess the Andy Dalton era is over. I had heard he was, actually, like being here. Could have certainly come to. Could have come back as that high-end backup. The question I have for Jameis is, has he gotten to where Andy Dalton is? He is fine. Andy Dalton's fine being the backup spot starter. Is Jameis there yet, or do you believe he still thinks he's a starter in the NFL?
I still think he thinks he's a starter. I think that he is going to – he had all those injury issues last year. Talking about the back fractures and everything like that, and those never really go away. Those are always going to – you kind of learn to live with it, And so maybe he uses this year again to kind of parlay that into a bigger deal down the road. If he does become a starter somewhere, it's not going to be this year, obviously, because he's going to be backing up Derek Carr. But if he has some interest at building anywhere else, because we know there's a decent rookie class of rookie quarterbacks that's slated to come out next year's draft as well, so he could always be a bridge guy for one of those. So I think right now he's playing it safe. He's staying where he knows the system, the players, the coaches.
Maybe there's a family element to it. Maybe there's a family element to it as well. You don't want to move the family again, that sort of thing.
And maybe while there may have been interest from Atlanta and from Carolina, maybe he just wants to stay in this division or just in New Orleans in general.
I'd be curious to know what interest he had gauged, and if it ever manifested into anything real with another organization, or really, as we've been kind of giving our take on this, that I think the market spoke for itself. Now, I want to say this because I don't want to come across that I'm down on Jameis, because look, it's not easy to make this decision. It's not easy to make this call. it's hard. I mean, it is. I mean, the guy he was the number 1 overall pick, a Heisman Trophy winner, and he's been all over the place in his career. I mean, there were moments where you felt like he was the next up-and-coming guy. There were moments where he was just a walking punchline because of the interceptions a couple of years back.
Yep.
He's got great energy. He's got always has a smile on his face. He's got he's had those viral moments that are just it's unbelievable. It's just Jameis. But I do believe he won't be the source of any tension. I know last year he was asked about it, and he said, I lost my job due to injury and, when he was talking to the media. But I was at every game, every single game where he was, especially when he was clearly healthy enough to play. I don't think he was ever fully healthy. No. Healthy enough to play, and they still chose Andy Dalton after Andy had given the organization a few reasons to hand that job back to Jameis. And I have to tell you, you never saw him sulking. You never saw him off in the corner, poor, pitiful me, self-pity. In fact, after every game I was at, especially on the road, I would see Andy and Jameis talking after the game in the locker room for 20, 25 minutes, just intense conversations, probably about the game that had just happened, and
right.
You saw this, you saw that. It always felt like he was never a burden on Andy. He was never a burden on the organization. He was just there to fill that role at that time. Now, it looks like that role is going to be replicated this year, except there'll be no controversy because we know who the starter will be and is going to be, and that guy is Derek Carr. And I think those two will get along because Derek Carr has a very engaging personality. Jameis Winston has a very engaging personality. The question now becomes, Vasilios, what do you do in the draft? Do you look at a quarterback in the draft?
Not with your first couple of picks,
Yeah.
Sean. I think that after all the departures on the defense that we saw yesterday, I think that's you kind of where you go. David Onyemata going to Atlanta and Shy Tuttle going to Carolina. I think your priority now. You already didn't have much of a presence in the interior defensive line. No, that's no slight to those guys. It's just they weren't always able to get it done.
Right.
You need to address that now because you're significant. I don't think there's actually a defensive tackle on the roster anymore.
No.
So
there are no defensive tackles on the roster. Continue your thought. I'm sorry. I'm just making sure we're not. I don't want to get caught.
I don't want to lie to you. Yeah.
And here we go. 27 seconds ago, the Saints restructured Michael Thomas's contract, reaching a 1-year, $10 million deal that has a max value of $15 million per source. That, according to Adam Schefter, Michael Thomas is staying in New Orleans. Look, if I didn't think there was a point in time where I thought Jameis Winston was gone, and I was already there months before that with Michael Thomas being gone. They're both back. They're both back in New Orleans. Oh, my goodness. So Michael Thomas is back, a 1-year deal, $10 million, up to $15 million. We'll see how that deal is structured. There's no way it's going to add to the cap burden. Kai Harley is way too smart for that. Yep. So Michael Thomas back in the fold. My God, what a journey for this guy. From the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL to 3 straight years of injuries, recruiting Derek Carr, back, pay cut, roster conversion to bonuses, all that stuff. Whew, he's here.
Glad that happened while we were recording.
Yes, glad that happened while we're recording. And you mentioned Shy Tuttle, David Onyemata, Caden Ellis, Marcus Davenport, all moving on.
Yep.
I thought Caden Ellis, the biggest loss of that group, because I felt like he had the highest upside. But they all got paid. Yeah. They all got paid, and I think the Saints knew that going in. You mentioned losing defensive ends and defensive tackles from last year. Seems like a lot, and they need bodies, they need depth, but it's not going to be hard to match their production from each season ago.
No.
From all 3 of those guys. Tuttle, Onyemata, Davenport. Davenport was never available. Tuttle had a bad year. Onyemata finished off pretty strong, but I think since he got paid a couple years ago, I don't think he's been the same player. So the wheels keep on turning here in the NFL free agency world, and the Saints making moves. Another guy is back in Michael Thomas, and so is Jameis Winston. How about that? So with that, we'll wrap this up and get back to work, and we'll start looking at what's next for the Saints here over the next couple hours/days. So let's send them on home.
All right, remember to like, subscribe, review, share. Again, everything helps. We're going to continue to crank these out, bring you more content as we get it. For Sean Fazan, I'm Vasilios. We'll catch you guys next time.